The argument goes like this: how can God be good when there is so much pain and suffering in this world? And the response Christians give is, look, God doesn't like pain and suffering, but it is necessary because God gave us free will, or it helps us to mature as people, or we would never know happiness without pain. But couldn't God have done it another way? If God is infinitely powerful, as you Christians claim, couldn't God have made a universe with both free will and no suffering? A universe with genuine happiness and no pain? The thing is, it's not that simple. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes, we are asking God to do a logical impossibility. If God is all-powerful, then can God create a square circle? Can God create a rock too heavy for him to lift? I mean, these questions are phrased as a yes or no question, but in reality, there is no answer because it's a nonsense question. Or at the very least, it falls into a very confusing area of philosophy that will not be resolved anytime soon. Still, it seems easy to imagine a world of happiness and no pain. Say God took away free will, so nobody ever hurt anyone else. And instead of using suffering to grow us, God created us fully grown, fully mature. And maybe it's true that we could never know happiness without pain, but couldn't God still just give us nice, happy feelings all the time? These solutions we come up with may well solve this world of all of our pain. But as we imagine God doing things differently, we are also imagining a different God. This is a God who prioritizes happiness and comfort over all other things, a God who creates humanity for a different purpose, a God who thinks differently about human nature, freedom, love, and goodness. And we are creating a God of our own understanding, one who thinks and behaves like we do, according to how we understand the best way to govern the universe. Douglas Groothuis is a Christian thinker who went through a brutal season watching his wife's brain deteriorate. And as you can imagine, he prayed so hard for God to heal her. And at one point, he was interviewed by Lee Strobel, who asked, "Hey, if you were God, would you heal her?" And Groothuis responded, "God is perfect, and he acts accordingly. If I were God, I'd be perfect, and therefore I'd act in the very same way he does." When you are going through the hardest times in your life, it's so easy to just turn back the clock in our imagination and run the story differently, where you pass the test, where you get the job, where mom doesn't get cancer, where your best friend doesn't betray you. And we think through it obsessively, and so we present our own script before God and accuse God for not doing things our way. We think, certainly if God is good and powerful, and if God really loves me, he would do it my way. But our understanding of goodness and perfection is not perfect. Just look at how much disagreement people have between how to run a family, how to run a school, how to run a government. Imagine how much more complex it must be to run the universe. There's a huge and diverse set of opinions out there, and not everyone can ever be right about everything. So if we take it that God is perfect goodness, perfect justice, perfect in how to create humans, perfect in how to govern the universe, then it makes sense that some things God doesn't make sense. Yes, God could have done things differently. Yes, we can imagine a world with less suffering. When Dr. Groothuis was asked about playing God, probably every bone in his body wanted to say, yes, absolutely, I would heal my wife. But ultimately, the question is not about whether God could do things differently. It's about whether we have the humility to trust God's way, even when it doesn't make any sense in our minds. We have other reasons to trust that God is real and God is good. Those reasons enable us to trust him even when we expect that God would have done it some other way. The late pastor and theologian Timothy Keller put it this way: if you have a God great and transcendent enough to be mad at because he hasn't stopped evil and suffering in the world, then you have, at the same moment, a God great and transcendent enough to have good reasons for allowing it to continue that you can't know. Don't misunderstand me. Christians talk about arguments for the existence of God, the reliability of the Bible, and the reasons why God allows pain and suffering. So I'm not saying that we must trust God without any good reason for trusting Him. Quite the opposite. I'm saying that we have good reasons to trust God even when questions remain. I have other videos talking about that, which I hope you'll take the opportunity to look through. So, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.